So today our speaker, as you've heard, is Lois Friedlander. And Lois is a certified group psychotherapist. She's specialized in facilitating a wide variety of groups in diverse settings, including schools, hospitals, research settings, and private practice. She's on the clinical faculty at UCSF, Department of Psychiatry, School of Medicine. She has a private practice in San Francisco and Marin with individuals, couples, and groups. She offers workshops, trainings, consultation, and supervision in psychotherapy and group dynamics. She supervises at the Community Institute for Psychotherapy Eating Disorders program, and she's a faculty member of the Northern California Group Psychotherapy Society. And she provides core course training certification as a group psychotherapist, and Irving Yalom has been her supervisor and consultant. So we're very excited to hear from her. Welcome, Lois.
There. Oh, hello, everyone. Every group is different, and when I said I was delighted to be here, it's because I really felt this sense of not just community, but play and teamwork and collegiality. There is a sense of community here. And it feels very different than RECAMFT, which is one that I go to quite a bit. And I think it helps having a piano and a kitchen. There's something about that vibe that's really nice. Plus, you have such a spacious area as well. I'll just launch right in. Occasionally, I may need to sit down. I did set a timer for 1 o'clock. That's my endpoint, right? Right. Okay. And like in my groups, when my Wednesday night group, for example, is over at 9, even if someone's talking, unless they're sobbing, we stand up and it's time to go. So boundaries are huge. But I seem to have talked about the end of group before the beginning. So let's get back here. I'm just to tell you a little bit about the overview. I will talk about Tuckman, but I can't seem to just talk about one. So I will be talking about Beck and Yalom. Tuckman is an overall model, and then sometimes some system-centered training as well. It just sort of happens once you get going. You start improvising and using a lot of different techniques from different theorists as you go. But I am grounded in Yalom's work. My theory is interpersonal, relationship, here and now, group as a whole work. So I am a Yalom person. And okay, got stuck on my speaker. So just to back up here, this is what we're going to be doing here. This one, I will talk about Tuckman primarily with some Yalom, and assessment, selection, review the group goals and tasks today. And then first, let's just talk a little bit about ourselves. Who are we? How many of us are group therapists? Quite a few, it looks like. And as I heard people going around, it sounds like there's a wide variety of groups that people facilitate. Also for today, comfort is key. If you need to get up and walk around and lean against the wall for a back injury or need to come and go, that's fine. And that's the way I also facilitate my groups. There's a lot of permissiveness. I'm not the police. I have a lot of group agreements that are key and crucial to keeping a group organized and to establishing cohesion. But I can't tell you how many times I have to say, I'm not the police. You can do what you want, say what you want, but I'm not the police. So the type of group, what kind of a group is this? Let's just throw out a few words.
Men's group.
Men's group? No, I mean this group, all this. Oh yeah, us. Yeah, us.
Not men's group.
Not a men's group. I'm going, So what is this? A professional group? So this is a group of professionals. Anything else? Educational? Networking? Community?
Open.
It's open.
Friendly.
Support?
Networking.
And networking, yep, we got that.
Eating.
Eating, got eating. There you go. Now, in terms of subgroups, do we have any subgroups of people here?
Men.
Men? We're getting those men in today. Men? Leadership circle. Any other subgroups? Pre-licensed. Yeah. Different licenses. Okay. Any other subgroups? Associates, yeah. Sponsors. Specialists. Yeah, this is important. In working, and especially if you ever become more familiar with a system-centered focus, you will want to use subgrouping in your work. You will want to know who is allied. And then you can even go with other groups. In your own groups, you can foster subgroups. Who's in a red shirt today? Who's wearing hiking boots? Who's eating salad? You can even help form subgroups within your groups in order to help with an alliance, to help people feel that they're not alone. And that's important. What's our group task? Education. Anything else? Education, networking, community, those kinds of things. So again, we have a task, and every single one of the groups that we facilitate has a task, and it's important to constantly remind our group of what the task is and what our goals are. And if you ever feel like you're stuck as a group facilitator and de-skilled, you can go back and say, hey, what are our goals? What is our task? And what is the individual goal of each member? It really is very grounding, and it helps people sort of reset. How do we feel about this group? How do we feel about this group? Wonderful. I mean, I can even feel it just walking in the room. There's this real light feel. Any other things? I saw some people being playful, feeling comfortable to speak out and be big and seen. Is there anything else? How do you feel? Safe. Safe. You feel safe.
Welcome.
You feel welcomed. Supported. You're feeling supported in this group.
There's an openness, which is part friendly and what ways that anybody can come. But there's a sense of openness.
There is. There's this sense of openness. Anything else? How do you feel about the group? Feeling is huge in a group, and this is a word you're going to be using a lot with the members of the group. How do you feel about it? Yeah.
Well, I feel cared about in this group, and therefore I care very much about the group.
Yeah. It's caring, the altruism. What you're doing, Laura, is offering some altruism to the group. That's what Yalom talks about a lot, that really lends and leads to group cohesiveness. People don't even know that they're altruistic. But what you just offered an example of is altruism, giving and receiving, gifts of the group. Anything else?
Curious.
You feel curious about this group? You're interested in this group and the people that make it up? Yeah. Anything else?
Anxious?
A little anxious? I'm going to say a little bit. You don't look like you're super anxious. Yeah, a little anxious, yeah. Okay. Okay. So,
I'd say not only individual curious, but the group is curious.
okay. And if you work with group as a whole, so if, got it. So if you work with the group as a whole as part of your theoretical framework, when someone mentions anxiety, when someone mentions curiosity, interest, support, that person is speaking for some aspect of the entire group in that particular model. I actually think that, and have found over the years, that that's almost always the case, that that person is speaking some way for everyone in the group that we are part of. So I use that whenever I'm working in my groups to, again, form some group cohesion. Yeah.
That's a little off topic, but how is it that what's the theoretical thing behind believing that if someone says anxiety, that it speaks for the group?
The group, it's a group as a whole, part of that theory, which is part of a psychodynamic approach to, and also Yalom's work group as a whole. Yeah. And a little bit of analytic work, and if you ask people how they feel, that's analytic a lot. And then we've got our meeting piece together, and someone said that our group is open. Okay, so let me, I keep waiting for this to happen all by itself. Subgroups we did, developmental phase. I'm new to this group, so I'm a newcomer. So for myself, if we're making a brand new group, anytime a member enters a group, this is a new group. It may be an old group to a lot of people, and they may be very welcoming, but the old group is kind of gone because this new person is going to be injecting a different kind of energy. So that's important for everyone to know as well. The other thing about groups is that in this situation, or many situations, when a facilitator brings in someone new, it's like parents just showing up with a new sibling, someone else showing up in group, and there are a lot of feelings about it. So again, as a facilitator, it's important to ferret out those feelings anytime a new member comes. Task leader, I guess you got us going. You're the task leader, Bob. And our group is defined. We already went through that. We went through gains. Is there a fee? Is there a fee? Membership dues. Membership dues, okay. And we already shared what we know about the group, so onward. We talked about this. Is this time limited? Yes. Has an agenda? And is there a contract of group agreements? Not formal group agreements. Some unspoken agreements. What would be some of the unspoken agreements? Listening
to the bell.
Listening to our bell, okay, nice. No walking in front of the camera, okay, great. Anything else?
Being an active listener.
Active listener, yes. Yeah.
We're polite.
We're polite. We're polite. And that's actually a nice thing to be when you're only meeting with a group for a short period of time and they're all professionals and you want to network and you put your best foot forward. Beginning stages of groups are often polite. It's the hallmark. And because you're only going to be meeting for a very short period of time, polite's the way to go usually. Yeah, it's a good rule of thumb. Now, I'll go more into group agreements a little bit later on. I have a long list of group agreements that I use with all of my groups, actually. And with the adolescent groups that I've facilitated, we make those agreements ourselves as we go. Some of the things that I've done with children are very colorful. They're done with chalk and crayon and poster board and paint and stickers and all kinds of beautiful things. It's certainly much more professional and subdued with my adult groups, although more intellectually and cognitively progressive, that's for sure. Okay, let's talk about coursework. How many of you have taken group psychotherapy coursework? Okay, how many of you have taken more than one semester? Okay, and how many of you have taken extended workshops? All right, advanced training. How about a week of group intensive work? Okay, marathon groups. And how many of you have studied it? It's a passion and you do it year after year and belong to group organizations. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can see that the hands keep going down over time. There's not a lot of training. When you were in graduate school doing your group dynamics course, was it once a week, twice a week? Were you actually in a group? Some, yeah? Some? Yeah, okay. So there's actually not a whole lot of training. I know you probably had to read a bunch of different group therapy books, et cetera, but it's really important if you're going to facilitate a group to always go back over the basics and revisit this stuff, because I know some of you must love your group work or you wouldn't continue to do it. Okay, myths. Just to see up here a few myths about therapy. Again, as facilitators, this is very important for us to know, and it's important for us to discuss with the members of our group. You know, getting a group, unless you work in an agency or unless somebody is funneling clients for a specific group to you, it is like herding cats. You get them, you talk to somebody for 20 minutes on the phone, you meet with them in a pre-meeting interview, and then they get divorced. Then they decide their company transfers them. Then they get a broken leg. Then there is always something. So it's really important, if you can get even just 3 good people, get going with your tiny group, and then go to 4, go to 5, go to 6. I usually don't go beyond 8. But it is like herding cats, so I feel your pain. It takes a lot of front-loading work, but it is really worth it in the long run to get your group screened and ready to go at the beginning. So see, these are some of the things to go over with your clients, that they must share their deepest, darkest secrets. That's common. They just say it right on the phone. I don't want to come. I'm afraid that I'm going to have to embarrass myself, shame myself, share every skeleton in the closet. But actually, they're just learning about boundaries. And I'll be forced to speak. That's not the case. At least in my groups, that is not the case. Not enough time for me. That's true, and there might not be enough time for them, but it's take all the time you need and leave the rest of the time to anyone else in group that wants to use it. That's kind of the motto that I go with. Take all the time you need and then leave the rest. Some people will say, and you'll hear them, those of you that do groups a lot, you'll hear them say, gee, I've been talking for a really long time, and then you look at your watch and it's been 60 seconds, because they're just not used to sharing. They're not used to speaking in a group.
Could you speak to create self-space? I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, you learn how there's not enough time for me. Usually what happens in a group is you recreate your family of origin, and there's this panic that if you're one of the siblings that hasn't had enough time, how are you going to carve that out? And maybe not. Maybe it's a work situation, and you've felt like there's one manager that's taking all the time, and you're just sitting there twiddling your thumbs waiting to see if you're going to be called on. And it happens in our educational system. Our educational system is not really prone to having you stand up and recite your math homework. It's just not happening. So you have to learn how to create space for yourself. And a lot of these myths are based in fear. They're very, and anxiety, Bob, based in fear and anxiety. And it's a learning process, how to be able to feel bigger and be comfortable with being seen. So it's one thing that, and I actually use all of this language when I'm talking in my groups. I'm talking to you just like I talk to the people in my groups. Confronting and aggression, it's rare, but there are people that will point. And pointing is just, it's part of our agreements. Pointing is not okay. You can even feel it if I just, there's something, it's almost like something power comes out of your hand, and it hurts your feelings or shames you or puts you on the spot and makes your blood pressure go up. It's just not okay. Swearing's okay. Swearing at somebody is not okay. So these are part of our group agreements. Now, some of you may work in a setting. I worked in an inpatient psychiatry setting for a long time. Swearing was just par for the course. I mean, everybody swore. We all swore. I swore. So it's part of the lexicon. It's part of the culture, and that's fine. So your group agreements have to match up with your culture. I will be overwhelmed. The fear of crying, and it just holds so many people back. They're worried they're going to break down and shed some tears. So again, it's something to talk about prior to getting your members into the group. Oh, I love this. Can you read that? The last thing I remember is being thrown into the dryer. And on the back it says socks without partners. I just think that is there's something rather cute about it. But this is like a type of group, and if you'll notice, like all the members are the same. There's a homogeneity to it. Someone here does a group for people that hear voices, I think, back here. Now, how great is that? A group for people that hear voices. They feel they're with their peeps. They're with someone else. They're not singled out. They're not ostracized, marginalized in that situation. It's wonderful. Whereas if you have one person in your group who's hearing voices, it makes it pretty difficult to really meet that person's needs and then also to work with the rest of your group. So you really want to be able to pay attention to the complexion and the makeup and the diversity of your group. Support psychoeducational, skills building, 12-step theme, interpersonal, CBT. These are all different kinds of groups. I've done them all, and now at this stage of my life, I'm sticking with interpersonal. Sometimes I'll throw in a little CBT, but mostly I always throw in psychoeducational. I usually throw in a little skills building, now that I'm thinking about it. And there is a lot of support, but I'm sticking, interpersonal is what I stick with. It's really important to ground yourself in one thing, so that you've got your feet under you or your seat under you, and that you really feel that you can go back to your theory, again, in those moments that can be difficult or stressful. You know, I was just looking at this CBT, DBT here, and telling you that I've facilitated these groups and realized I didn't tell you anything about myself, did I? How I got in. So let's back up again while we have it just here. I'll be brief because it's been a lot of years. I started when I was at the University of Kansas. I actually started as a performance major and was very, very anxious. And so I quit performing. And how I'm up here, how this stuff, you know, you just drag that ball and chain along, and here I am presenting in front of a group of people and I'm not fainting. But not the case then. So I decided I'd get out of performance and I'd go into therapy. And I went into music therapy and I got hired eventually after Napa State Hospital clinical training and then working at residential treatment in Mendocino. I ended up at UCSF and I had my career there. And we were doing 3 and 4 groups a day. But I was really fortunate to get there and have since had wonderful opportunities. But what got me going on groups and what really sort of made me take a good hard look at myself, I was in my early 20s, and let me see if I can find their photo. There it is. This is exactly what happened. Toni and Vicky. And they were really my Waterloo. Toni and Vicky were in a group, and it was like maybe my 3rd month of my clinical training. And I was training actually to be a group therapist, but as a music therapist, and how to use nonverbal modalities within a group to help adolescents express themselves and all the trauma that they have experienced. Well, Toni, it was my very first day working alone. My supervisor said, "Oh, you can work alone." And I was excited. I put a lot of time into preparing for that group. But I did not think about what stage of development that group was in, how many times they had met, what the issues were between the group members interpersonally. I brought in my music instruments. I was like ready to go with all of my fortitude and bright-eyed, bushy-tailed attitude. Well, Toni and Vicky were fighting, and Toni decided in the middle of the group that he would get up and rip Vicky's wig off her head. And that's what this was. So I thought, I was totally perplexed. After he ripped off her wig, I decided I'd try to stop it, and Toni punched me. I guess you call it a sucker punch. He knocked me down on the floor. And fortunately, the tech outside the door heard what was going on, and he raced in and grabbed Toni and hauled him out. I don't remember what happened to Vicky, but I do remember getting up as fast as I could. And after a group was over, thinking, oh, you know, this was a disaster. Do I really want to do this? And where to begin? So I had to do some soul searching. So I decided to get a new job as fast as I could, and as it happened, the only jobs on my resume were music therapy experiences and residential treatment and hospital. So when this job opened at UCSF, I said, great, I took it, and I was hired as a music therapist, but I had to do 3 and 4 groups a day. But the support was amazing, and it was a teaching and training hospital, so I was able to learn how to facilitate groups because I was supervised every day, several times a day. I never worked alone. I always apprenticed. It was just by luck. Just by luck, it was a very rich, supportive environment for learning how to facilitate groups. And there were a lot of people at the university at the time. There was inpatient, outpatient, et cetera, working with the American Group Psychotherapy Association. And a lot of the doctors were learning how to facilitate groups with them, and they were in a 2-year training program. And so I got in that training program, and I got to do all that studying, and I would study on my lunch hour. I started groups after work in the outpatient department that were my own groups. It was like a dream come true. So for my whole career, I just lucked out. I really lucked out. So I'll tell you when I learned about my experience, just to keep moving on with this. Well, first, let me ask if there are any questions. I skipped over the slide that said questions. Any questions?
Did you say you worked with Yala?
He was my supervisor and my consultant, yeah, for about 5 years.
Do you have any of his old tapes?
I have some of his old tapes. I do. Oh, sure. You know, his son lives in Mill Valley, and his son has a lot of Yalam's videos on his psychotherapy.net website. And he also consults. He says, this particular son, he's got 2 and a daughter, but this particular son is a psychologist. And so he and his dad did quite a bit of collaboration, and yeah, he's got those right up there. But I'm happy. I'll talk a little bit about Yalam here. I'm a little in love with him, I have to say. Yeah, it was wonderful, really wonderful. And that's why I stick with the interpersonal, because I just learned so much. Plus, he focused a lot on the existential issues as well, and used that as some of the underpinnings of a major portion of his work. And I guess many of you have that doorstopper tome of a book. It's like this big, 600 pages or something. But he really made his mark, and I really owe him a lot. Survival. And this is basically it for all of us facilitators and members. Oh, yeah, members of the group as well. They're all very fearful. We talked about some of the myths. But survival is key. And it's a little Freudian, yes. Freud said it, and there was a big part of my life where I just wanted to ignore everything that Freud said. But this I think he was right about. We actually all are in there to survive. And it's a very stressful situation when a member joins a group, and suddenly we're resorting to all of these behavior. I'm actually in 3 consultation groups, and I know when I personally walked in, I was suddenly regressing and resorting and trying to cope with a new situation as well. We do a lot of assessment, a lot of evaluation when we walk in. We want to know how somebody looks, whether or not they're kind or aggressive. Do they have nice clothes? Do they have a nice smile? Or do they have nice eyes? Do they look like they're going to attack me? All those kinds of things. So I did learn about survival. I think that it's key in groups, and that every member has value and offers gifts to a group. And this I came to through the work of Yvonne Agazarian in system-centered group psychotherapy. She's done tons of research for decades, and I've been in many of her groups and actually participated in the system-centered group program here in the Bay Area. It's quite an active organization. They do a lot of subgrouping. They believe in pairing and subgrouping, that 2 and 3 members in any group may agree on a particular issue, and they will let those 3 people dialogue and talk about that issue while the rest of the group observes, and to great success. You just have to be a really good system-centered facilitator and be ready to work the system in that way. But one of the things that she taught me, and the other, and Ariadne Beck, who's been doing this research since, gosh, I think one of her seminal papers was 1984. Beck talks about the value of every single member, the scapegoat, the defiant leader, the task leader, the emotional leader, and really made me appreciate, rather than want to be angry with, hateful and rejecting of anybody that had a thought that they might try to sabotage the group, were ambivalent that whether or not they were going to be in the group, whether or not I thought they were going to destroy the group that I had taken so long to get together. That would just really get my goat. So I learned their value and how to bring that into the group, how to use it to the group's advantage, and how they were the voice of something in the group that just wasn't working for them. So every member has value and gifts to the group. That's altruism. So, and facilitators must figure out what those gifts are. We figured out one of them earlier with Laura. Build the group. So, facilitator's task: begin and end the group on time. Create a safe, I can say this stuff, create a safe, sturdy holding container. What does that mean? It takes a lot of work, and one of them is by using the group agreements and agreeing to keep to the agreements, reminding members of their goals. Every single one of your members should have a goal, and it should be talked about on a regular basis. Understanding conflict and how to negotiate and resolve and manage it, and being very brave. If you feel that that members are angry about something that's going on in the group, I've got an example right now, actually. I have to admit that even with all these years of experience, I have been lately a little bit wishy-washy about whether or not I will tell group members the reason that a member has called to say they're not going to show up. Now, in the past, it was never an issue for me. I just didn't tell them. Jane's not coming. End of story, period. But I noticed that some of the members were just so anxious and just kept going back and back and back to it. They were worried, are they dead on the road? So-and-so's husband has been really awful to her. Do you think that it's safe for her to maybe be home? Just on and on. So I told them that I'd do some experimenting and changing it up. And what I'm finding in changing it up is that it's better for me to just not tell them. I was trying to be more of a, a nice mom, or I was trying to contain all of their anxiety. I wanted things to go smooth that night. Maybe I'd had a rough day. Whatever my reasons were, it wasn't in service of the membership of my group. And actually, after last night in group, I can see that that's just what I need to do. We've talked about it enough. We're going to put it on our agreements. We're going to write it down, and that's just how it's going to be until it comes up again. And that's how groups go. Observe communication patterns. Oh my goodness, our group's been together so long now that everybody knows what the communication patterns are, including mine, and they pointed out. Who talks the most? Who's like, you take your finger out of the dike and then Amy can't stop herself? Who's a downer? Who's an upper? Who's got to talk about a lot of stuff out of the group rather than in the group? Who's an academic? Who's a worrywart? Everybody's got their style. And they learn to speak to each other's strengths and weaknesses and shore each other up. Now, this is an advanced concept, this last one here. I don't know what I was thinking when I put that on there. It's certainly not the basics. But gather the group unconscious and return it to membership for examination. Does that make sense to anyone?
No.
Yes?
Yeah.
Oh, what does that mean to you?
Well, I get a sense of what the dynamic or the concerns in the group, and they speak to it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually it's an eye-opening concept. If you're able to gather the atmosphere, if you're able to gather some of the key words, if you're able to gather some of that feeling, and then you make a process comment about it and put it back into the group, it's tremendously helpful. And it'll spark so much conversation and interaction in the group that you'll find you don't even have to work for 10 minutes. You just got to pay attention. Well, which is working too, but it's like you don't have to, get the conversation going. You don't have to tap dance up there. So that's what that is. It's tremendously helpful. Tremendously helpful. Yes.
I think it'd be an interesting question as to how do you gather that?
Oh, how do you gather it? Okay.
The very nature of it is non-conscious, so how do you go about that with any sense of accuracy?
I actually wait. I take a long time. It's not something that happens instantaneously, and sometimes I'm not able to gather it until maybe an hour in. It's a slow process, and yes, it's unconscious, it's sort of intangible, and my job is to make it tangible. So oftentimes I'll gather a number of phrases or words, string them together, and ask if members have images, if they can put color or form or volume or a weight or to make it tangible. And I'll say, if you could make it tangible, what would it look like? What would it feel like? And that seems to bring it together. And the next thing you know, the group in this big group soup that we have is building this collective unconscious thing. It's really, really fun. Yeah.
For an example, like, I don't know, I'm not getting it totally.
Uh-huh.
Would an example be like if there's a new member that's joined a group that's already sort of formed, and then you notice that people aren't dropping into deeper emotional states or talking about deeper things. So let's say there's a new person that came in.
Mm-hmm.
Would you then say like transitions are hard and wondering if there's anything that anyone wants to speak about or anything that they're feeling or using images or whatever
Yes.
about the change and about life in general, how he's having to go through changes.
Exactly.
Is that like an example?
That's exactly.
All right, thank you.
That's exactly. And to be able to add the feeling, and is there a somatic response, and do you feel it in your body, and do are we jockeying for position? You'll hear members in the group start to talk about, I've been with this group for 8 years. When they introduce themselves, it gives them that oomph, that grounding that they need. When they're new to group, they want to invite the new person in, but they want to let them know who's the top dog. Yeah, that's right. Just a little subtle. Group stages, this is really important. How many of you lead really long-term groups? Okay. Here and here and here. The long-term groups, it's important in those particular situations to know when you're past the beginning. It's once you get to 12 weeks, you're kind of moving on. So you've got to be ready to move with your group as they evolve. What do you say after you're polite? Someone was saying you're polite. Yeah, what happens after you're polite? Well, Vicky and what was that guy that hit me? Power, control, arguments, Toni and Vicky. So I didn't realize that when I stepped into group that I was stepping into the power and control phase. I was a beginner, so I thought, we're all beginners. It's completely wrong. They had lived together for 2 years already. It was residential care. Differences, challenges, facilitation, to identify whether or not you're in or out, top or bottom, near or far. That's all yalom. If you're in and out is one of the first parts of group, and you really are interested in whether or not you're going to be accepted or rejected, liked or hated, for all kinds of reasons, whether you talk or you don't talk, how you look, how you don't look, whether you walk, talk, and chew gum the same. So those are huge concerns, to identify whether I'm in this group or I'm not on that line, but I'm out of this group. Or you've got the ambivalent people who actually will straddle the group. They've got one foot in and one foot out. They're leaning in, and if things get a little, then they'll lean out. So that's important for us as facilitators to notice and address. To identify top or bottom, that's the little thing where we were just saying, oh, I've been here for 8 years, you know, those kinds of things. Who's more of an emotional leader? I know I'm switching to Beck again, but your emotional and your task leaders really help you. And so they are your more top. Now, who's more emotionally top in the group? Those are the people that sit in their chair, they speak out, they seem comfortable, they contribute a lot, they're really responsible group members on the surface. Who's on the bottom? Maybe it's somebody that has a lower level of comfort speaking in a group. Or maybe they've been traumatized. Maybe they don't know how to socialize. Maybe they've been under-socialized, or they grew up with really impoverished social circumstances. And so or maybe they've got a crippling anxiety or something that's really shaming that's holding them back. We tend to look at it as the group. The group just naturally will look at this as a top or bottom hierarchical sort of thing. And to go back to the old chicken coop pecking order, that's what that is. Yeah.
When you said to notice and address these, like in or out, do you address them explicitly?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. And sometimes we'll actually stand up and I'll ask people, I'll put a vase or something in the center of the circle and I'll ask people, can you place yourself, if this is the center of our group, where you feel tonight? Do you feel like you're in this group? And the people that do will walk right up. And if you feel like you're out tonight or on the edge or ambivalent, where in the room would you go? You can see someone will go to the kitchen if they can. They'll really pull way out. The only thing holding us together are those chairs, but emotionally, they're taking a walk. So, and so I talk about it. What can the group do to help you? How can we make this more comfortable place for you? And we talk about it. And the same thing with near or far. Do you feel emotionally? This is actually in the more intimate, when you talk about intimacy and forming really intimate, caring relationships. And let me just also say that although these are developmental, we do move back and forth over time. There's no hard fixed rules and boundaries about when some of these things crop up. Gain enough clinical experience? Yes. Oh, yes. I've been in a consultation group now with other group therapists, certified group therapists actually, for the last 8 years, and then before that more so, and then supervision, and then I go for marathon, these marathon groups, if you go for a week intensive, and I've done Tavistock groups and those kinds of things. I've learned so much. I've grown personally so much. I mean, that's why I can get up here and talk about this, whereas in the past it wouldn't have happened. And the other thing I want to say about group, it's an organism. For those of you that have done this a lot and you love your groups and you really like being with them and you spend regular time with them, there's this feel of them. They breathe, they move. There is an atmosphere, a presence about the group. It is a living, pulsing being. They create, we all co-create it, and the facilitator is part of that co-creation.